When it comes to sim racing, nothing quite ruins a great sim racing experience like a bad FOV. Now, I'll never claim to be an expert at anything because I just don't want that responsibility. But at the same time, I have gotten a lot of compliments and comments on how the FOV and the POV videos in the sim rig look. And today I thought I would share with you guys how I've been able to set that up and make it look so realistic, and how I set up the FOV and how I film the videos, and kind of go into that a bit in detail because it's been a minute since I've updated you and I've made some changes in how I'm doing things. And as an added bonus, a good friend of the channel hooked us up with a print file to make a new piece of headgear that'll allow me to basically run longer races with the camera on because it's a lot more comfortable than the current setup. So we're going to check that out. And if you guys want to know more about it, we'll talk about it later in the video and I will tell you guys how you can hook yourselves up as well. Let's jump in the rig. All right, now that I've got the sim rig all loaded up, I can kind of explain some of the setup features to you. Now, some of these things are things that are pretty common on a sim rig, and if you guys have seen my videos before, you know some of it's not all that common. So first off, one of the things that makes the FOV look so good in this rig is having a bezel-free kit. If you don't have that, that is just one of those upgrades that makes a huge difference whether you're running 27-inch or 32-inch. If you're doing 32-inch, you're going to need some things to modify it just slightly because they only make a 27-inch kit. But overall, very impactful, makes a big difference. And I know on camera you can see a bit of a dark line here. For me, that dark line doesn't really exist, so it helps to blur the line a lot better between the bezels and just helps hide it, and it looks a lot cleaner and better. Another thing that helps a whole lot is having a wheel extension. So you can't really see it because it's hidden behind my dash that I've built, but my wheelbase is actually behind the monitor, and this shaft pretty much sits maybe like 2 millimeters below the monitor, giving it that perfect alignment. You guys will see with the wheel on how good that looks. And then of course, having everything built up into the dash, as the lights start to dim and everything kind of starts to work the way it's supposed to with ambient lighting, it stands out a lot less that there's a dash that's not necessarily up against the screen, and you're going to see it all kind of blurs together. And as good as it looks on camera, it looks just as good when you're racing because a lot of it's peripheral to begin with. So if I'm paying attention to the track and the cars up here, everything around me is peripheral. So that peripheral view looks as realistic as, you know, a real car would, and it helps to blur those lines a lot more and just make it that much more immersive. Now, let's talk about settings a little bit because there's a few things that I think people miss when they're setting this up in iRacing. And some of this also applies to Assetto Corsa, which I think is probably the main other sim racing title that's being used in sim rigs. Oh yeah, and there's one other thing, and I explained this in the triple screen setup video, but I'm gonna just reiterate that for me, when I did my setup, I tuned it in to work where my left monitor is curved inward a lot more than my right monitor. So there's a lot more angle happening over here than there is over here. And the reason for that is with having it pulled in too much, there was a lot of darkness over here. There was some color issues with the bezel free kit. And I just found that it was overall more immersive and looked better if the monitors weren't at the same angle. It did require a much longer tuning process to get it to look good, but ultimately I think it was worth the time and effort put into it. Now in that video, I talked a lot about tuning in the monitors and how I adjusted it to make it all look right and set it up. I'm not going to go too deep into that, but one thing I see a lot is over here on the right, I see a lot of people that still have their dash up against the monitor over here, and it really throws off the FOV, and people can't quite figure out how to get this to look right. And the thing is, unless you check this render scene using 3 projections option right here, you're never going to be able to get that dialed in right because it's not going to adjust out. It's not going to account for the curvature of the screen. If you're having that problem, you got to make sure you check this box. It'll help get everything in line. Now, once you've got that dialed in and your FOV is as good as you can possibly get it in the settings, you can hit Control and F12, and that's going to bring up the camera edit menu. you don't want to have to use this too much. As you can see, I've adjusted the pitch just a little bit. I've adjusted the Z-axis just a little bit, but I haven't done too many settings with it because ultimately you want to be able to do as much as you can with the actual calculator. Get it as close as you possibly can before you start messing with these settings, because it'll start to look really wonky and disconfigured if you have to move this too much. Alright guys, now that we have everything all loaded up and the FOV's nice, we can talk about camera setup and headgear. So right now, I'm using my old headgear, which I've been using for quite a few years now, and it's pretty janky. It's a GoPro head strap with basically a U-bolt from Home Depot that I've bent out in order to position the camera just over my mouth. There's a few things wrong with that, and a few things right with it, I guess, too. But first off, having the camera over my mouth, as I sit here and talk and breathe, I can feel the heat coming back into my face, which is super uncomfortable, and it gets really warm really quick. I also have a lot of pressure on my forehead because the camera is pulling down on the center, and it's just quite uncomfortable for long races. So it's something that I've never really wanted to use long term, but never bothered to find another solution to anyways. Now, what's great about it is, first off, you can see that having the camera over my mouth actually makes this feel like almost the perfect point of view, where it looks realistic. You can see the dash in the wheel, and overall it's aesthetically, it looks great. But what if I could point you guys in the direction of something a bit more comfortable? And that's what I'm aiming to do today by sharing this print that I've been hooked up with by Everlost. So let me show you guys what I'm wearing for a headpiece right now. I'll show you guys what we're going to test out, and we'll see how the video compares from one piece to the other, because it is going to change the position of the camera just slightly, but it also might center the camera just a bit too. So let's check it out. Alright guys, as I described, this is the headgear I'm currently using. You can see the camera's right over my mouth. Everything I say is blasting back in my face. Not only that, I've got this U-bolt that comes down the middle, and as you can see, it protrudes quite a bit. And that is not necessarily pleasant from a vision standpoint. And then of course it bounces a lot. It's not very stable. So overall, like, while it looks good, there's a lot of uncomfortable things about it. And then of course this thing starts to pull down. I've usually got cables hanging out for OBS, and that just starts to create some pressure up here in the head. Overall, there's just a lot of things that could be a lot better about this. So my friend over at Everlost Studios hooked me up with his new design for a camera mount, and I think it's pretty awesome. I'm looking forward to seeing how the video footage comes out. So let me show you guys what that looks like. And here it is. So obviously I'm not winning any fashion awards with this one either, but from a comfort standpoint, as you can see, I've got an even distribution on my forehead, so no more pressure points in the middle of the forehead, no more bouncing of the camera. It's just going to follow my head movement exactly. As far as camera alignment, the camera is much more centered in the middle of my nose. It might be a little bit offset. I don't know that I have the strap exactly perfect, but we'll get it aligned before we start filming. As far as overall comfort though, so much more comfortable, and my line of sight is a lot better. I no longer have a bar in the middle. I would like to drop the camera down a little more. I do use a media mod, so it sits a little higher than I think a normal GoPro would. But there are extensions provided by Everlost Studio that I can print that'll get it a bit lower. Just need to add a few more extensions in there, I think, and I'll get it to the right height. Overall, very awesome setup. I think it's going to work really great. I look forward to jumping in the rig. If you guys are looking to get one of these, you want to film some POV with a GoPro or any action camera, make sure you check out Everlost Studio. I'll put a link to his Patreon in my description so you guys can go check it out, have access to it. And let's jump in the rig and test it out. Alright guys, here we are back in the rig with the new headgear. As expected, it is much more comfortable. My line of sight is much better not having a bar down the middle of my face. I think from a camera angle perspective, I do think it's probably going to need to be lowered a bit, which is something I'll work on. I'm definitely going to find a way to make this work though, because it's leaps and bounds better than what I'm used to, and I feel like I could actually do some longer races and film them if I could just get a little bit of cooling in the rig. I think with the lights and everything, I've just heated this room up so much making the video that it makes this thing a little bit hot. That's not any fault of the design, that's just the nature of this room. But as far as comfort and everything, it's definitely amazing. You guys can let me know in the comments which video you thought looked better. I used the same car on the same track just so we can get a good comparison. Of course, I'm trying to keep it together on the track still because I'm talking, but as far as being distracted by the camera, it's not nearly as much as I was previously, so big plus there. Now, if you guys want one more comparison, I'm just gonna blip over to what is a kind of messy video because the GoPro didn't record it right, of me in an actual car, in my actual car, testing out this head mount before I came home to make this video, just to see and compare how a real car looks to the sim rig and give you guys an overall perspective of whether this actually works and whether my FOV settings feel pretty accurate. Let me know in the comments which head gear did you think looked better, and also how close did I get to a realistic field of view and point of view video when you compare to being inside an actual car. I would love to hear you guys' feedback. So obviously the real car footage could have been a lot better, but I think the overall POV video looked pretty good from the new headgear versus the old. I'm actually pretty happy with it. I don't even really think the camera needs to drop down, but to get it out of my line of sight, I am going to drop it a little bit because I know that's not going to have a significant impact on the overall appearance of the video. I can just tilt it up a little bit more and it's going to look just as good. Now, if you guys haven't been following the build that I've been working on, I've got some new things coming. As I said in my last videos, my goal is now to convert this sim rig to a full 992 build, which means getting everything exactly right. And my next thing that I'm working on right now is getting the roll bars right. So as you could see, this is part of the roll cage to the 992 that I recently printed. I think it came out really well. I'm really excited to print the rest of it and continue that project. This was kind of a long print, so I've got some more work to do with it. But I think once I get the roll cage right, finish getting the 992 wheel built, then I can focus on the 992 button box. And by the time I'm done, this thing should look almost 100% cup car, with the exception of the center console, which I'm not going to go full cup car. That's going to be GT3 RS because technically I shouldn't have a shifter in a cup car. Occasionally I like to play some other games and have a little bit of fun and have a stick shift. So won't be changing that. That's going to stay the way it is. Everything else though, serious conversions coming. Make sure you guys hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, and I'll see you next week.